Hello and welcome back to the Trinity Student Managed Fund podcast with me, Emanuele Roncalli di Montorio Veronese, where I speak with leaders in the world of business, finance and technology to give our students a better insight into the careers we may wish to pursue. Today's episode is sponsored by Setanta Asset Management, a Dublin-based boutique investment manager specialising in equity and multi-asset strategies with a fundamental value approach since 1998. With a proven track record of strong performance and 13.2 billion euros in active assets under management, Setanta serves a diverse client base, including institutional insurance, pension funds, charities and family offices across Ireland, Germany, Canada and the United States, applying a long-term investment philosophy that clients value. Today I'm thrilled to sit down and speak with Nathalie Dompé, who is the Co-CEO of Dompé Farmaceutics, where she oversees market development and the strategic approval of new drug launches in the US, driving innovation in the pharmaceutical space. Nathalie also serves as the CEO of Dompé Holdings, a diversified company with interests in pharmaceuticals, agriculture, and high-tech industries. Additionally, she also serves on the boards of Movendo, Philogen and Dompé Farmaceutics, playing a key role in shaping the future of healthcare and technology. A graduate with honours in business administration from Bocconi University in Milan, Nathalie brings a wealth of knowledge and leadership to the industry. Get ready for an inspiring and insightful conversation with Nathalie Dompé. Okay, so I'm delighted to welcome a very special guest. We have today Nathalie Dompé, as you would have heard in the pre-recorded introduction, CEO of Dompé Holdings and co-CEO of Dompé Farmaceutici. So Nathalie, firstly, thank you for taking the time and welcome to the Trinity SMF podcast.
Thank you, Emanuele. Thank you. And thank you for having me here on this podcast. Tell me a little bit about Trinity and how this podcast started.
Yeah, so I suppose the podcast itself was started 5 years ago by Will O'Callaghan. He's now working very hard at Morgan Stanley, and the goal was really to interview business leaders and learn about their successes, the lessons they've had throughout their careers, and kind of pass it on through our society, but also the university as a whole through this podcast.
Is it mostly heard within the university or beyond, or?
Mainly the university, but we've had now, at different conferences, people come up and say, we've listened to this episode on the podcast. So we're expanding through Europe slowly but surely.
Great. Wonderful. Well, congratulations for taking it forward. I think it's a beautiful way. The traditional media has been passing on the limelight to new media, and I think podcasts have taken over this past few years tremendously and as a source of information. So it's a very unique moment. I don't know if you've had some feelings of that affecting you as well, if these last few years have some way shifted the attention and put more and given a stronger platform to your contents.
No, absolutely. I mean, everyone now, everyone is getting their content from podcasts. I mean, even the news or memos by Howard Marks, instead of actually reading it, people are preferring to listen to it.
So how do you think this affects the students? Are they starting to inherit that habit of getting information through podcasts and versus like traditional media? Or how do you think like the typical student informs himself or herself?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, through actual studies, I think reading, actually reading the physical book or, the online PDF is the main form.
Seriously, I think the average student gets daily news reading the physical books?
No, in terms of news and actual content of what's going on in the world, definitely through podcasts now, 100%, or kind of more interactive content. I meant more, studying and,
no, for lessons, sure.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, okay, so you think most students now, what are they at Trinity aged like 18 to 21?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So they like, I mean, it's an incredibly interesting moment because you see this generation that will definitely take over and install a new likelihood of habits in the next 4 or 5 years that will completely change and sediment new ways of receiving information, or will somehow revert back to systems that have been very solidly challenged lately? And so I'm very curious to understand from them, where do they think that they're going to land?
It's definitely interesting where it's going. Or
well, let's say that there's ways like we have TV. I was talking to a friend of mine regarding sports, and they were telling me that like the young generations don't even watch a whole match anymore, like a soccer match or whatever. They in fact look more at sound bites on socials and stuff like that, but they don't sit in for the whole hour and 30 minutes of soccer match or basketball match or whatever it is, which will possibly change the financial incentives of the teams, of the values of the teams, of their distribution, and so on and so forth. So it's an interesting thing to observe. And then when you think about traditional media, talking about like newspapers and all the traditional media, like the press, the typical press, that seemed to have been decaying for many years now. And if we think about TV, like news, that has also kind of gone down, but in a different way, because often there's like sound bites of that, which are instead landing to the media, and when they go viral, they have something else. But in this, they have a social, like, well, they have legal standards where now, if you think about the New York Times, it's still bounded. And so the social media, podcasts, etc., where are they getting their information from? And so if all this other world decays, how are they gonna structure based on truth and not necessarily opinion? Because the idea of podcasts and all these other medias is that they give voice to opinions, not necessarily facts. And this is what's taking over, I think. People want to hear it from a different perspective. They don't just get bored with a specific fact that is listed, and then we discover that anyways it's biased, and then we discover that anyways it's not really accurate. And so overall, there's an editorial perspective that is more important, and it's an interesting area where I want to observe how new generations approach it, because that will give us the answer of what this will go towards. And then the big question is, where will accuracy come from? Like, will there be like an encyclopedia of daily news that will somehow give information? And so I don't know how you guys are thinking about it.
Well, I definitely agree with you on the point of people consuming content in much more shorter form. I never downloaded TikTok for that reason, and I'm so glad I never did, because I can just see how addictive it is to certain students. But I'd really love to really kind of dive deep into your career. And I think an interesting place to start is from my research. I discovered you had an accident when you were younger, and it affected your back. Could you kind of tell our listeners what happened and how it impacted your life and your career?
I was skiing with the school. It was the typical situation where it's like 4 p.m. last day, just before going back to our families, I guess. And I broke my back, and I was in an incident. Sometimes these things happen. In that case, it was something that I think we were not allowed to do. Our teacher forced us down this very narrow part where normally you have ski lifts going uphill, and it was outlined by pine trees left and right, so there was no escape, and snowcat was coming up. So I had the opportunity to embrace the snowcat or the tree. I chose the tree. I landed in torsion against that tree, and it was a pivotal moment in my life where breaking my back, then that meant I had to remain in forced paralysis for 4 months, and then starting to, get seated back, and then learn how to walk and redo everything. It took about a year for me to be up and walking again, and took about, I think, 3 years to get my cast off, and so on and so forth. So together with that, obviously I had other areas of my body impacted. My tibia was also broken, and some other things, but minor compared to the back. And up to this day, I really need to take care of myself. In those moments, it's different because you stop going to school. You obviously have your life impacted, but I was 11. So somehow you have that resilience when you're that young of not understanding how it should be. So there's not that dramatization of the fact. You just take it for face value. And it did change possibly the way I perceived the social interactions around me. It took me a little longer. I think that's a very important moment when you're like your pre-teenage years of when you really learn how to socialize and be out with your friends and so on. And for me, it definitely took a little extra time to learn how to be part of a group, and probably I'm still trying. But that turned out to be good because then it allowed me to not feel ever too comfortable. And so probably when later on in my life I had opportunities that took me away from home or from whatever would have been otherwise a comfortable bubble. Well, that bubble was popped for me many years before that, thanks to this. So all in all, I think there's all these experiences that impact you, that are important moments of luck, even though they're disguised as negative things.
Could we dive deeper on that? You know, one of these moments which were actually lucky, but at the time you
no
just what would this guy?
There, yeah. I can't remember what's the term? Something in disguise. Sure, like breaking my back was definitely one of those moments where it seemed a very negative impact to anybody. And in reality, it turned out to create the basis for some sort of psychological resilience and independence and lack of social engagement that helped me achieve things later in life. That's more what I meant. But for sure, there are other moments. You know, sometimes it's not getting that job that you wanted. Sometimes it's not getting into that university that you wanted. And sometimes it creates a negative loop, and you belong to that negative loop where you're saying, wow, how is this going to be good for me? How is not getting into Trinity College or into whatever objective I've posed to myself, how's this going to be good for me? And in reality, maybe it serves as a platform for you to develop anger, determination, resilience. And that same mind preparation will be extremely useful at a later moment when suddenly it all makes sense. And I have had plenty of that. I don't know if you've ever experienced something like that.
Well, not to that extent, in terms of like, you know, being in hospital for prolonged periods of times in that, you know, in those early stages. I mean, you would have been exposed to a lot of, you know, hospitals and the pharma sector. Did that, you know, did that impact what you were thinking about careers and
I think
that?
For sure it did, because you start seeing it more. I wasn't hospitalized for very long because when you're in forced paralysis, your conditions are relatively stable. You just can't move. So you're shipped at home, and luckily for me, so I don't think my hospital time was more than maybe a little bit more than a month, probably.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit more if you put it all together, because I had all the surgery for the leg and stuff like that. But otherwise, it wasn't a huge downtime. But yeah, I remember when I was very, very little, I must have been like 5 or 6. I had the doctor kit that I pulled together myself. And I think I did want to be a doctor. And I remember I had this perfume that at the time was my magic healing powder, something like that. And so as a 6-year-old, if I had a cut, I would put the perfume on top of the cut and it would go away instantly. Now, if I think about it, it was perfume, it was alcohol. It must have hurt like crazy. But psychologically, I was thinking, I'm going to be a doctor. I know how to handle this. Hold on a second. Let me do it. And so you go into what is undoubtedly the most important effect in nature, which is placebo. And I think that is very powerful. So yes, getting exposed to this in one way or the other, I was looking for those cues. I loved what it meant to have that relationship between the world of disease and the world of possible. And that was always something that I think I danced around and caressed since I was very, very tiny. And then having my family into this business, of course, meant that I was exposed to that by all means very early. And I was always curious, even psychologically. I love psychology. I love to understand people, to understand where they're coming from. I like to challenge myself of never jumping to a conclusion, but always to take a step back and do it as unemotionally as I can afford, to say, well, hold on a second, if this is the output, why is it going this way? Maybe it has nothing to do with me. Let me see the path. And that path is not so different from how chemistry comes together to create like a molecule that has to pass through various barriers in your body. Because we always think about molecules in a biological way and never through physics, but really it's like barriers too. And so sometimes even if you have a good biological component, you still need to go to your target, wherever that is. And to get there, you have various barriers in your body. And so how do you get through those barriers? And that has less to do with biology, but more to do with physics. And if you think about it in that way and abstract the concept of chemistry, molecules, non-molecules, disease, not disease, you see that our brains function in a very similar way. It's the idea of being able to possess a thought and the idea of represent that thought through various challenges and barriers that you have that are biases or not. And so I was always curious about looking to the world around me through those lenses.
So just like a scientific way of looking at it. It's really interesting, especially because I was curious because you have the degree from Bocconi, but then you also pursued a degree in theater from UAL. I'm wondering, could you bring us back to the university days of Nathalie? What were your your
what was I
decisions and
thinking? Yeah, I was a very good student. I'll be completely honest, like I'll own this because I never do like it's always very positive, but for me it wasn't. I was an extremely good student. I did not know I had ADHD. I discovered it later. So when I went into Bocconi, it wasn't probably the right fit for me. I should have gone to some university, maybe in UK or America. The reason I never knew I had ADHD was because I studied I pursued my studies at the international school in Milan, which was a school that by definition followed the IB model. And before that, there were Key Stage 3 and similar methods, which were probably applicable to any ADHD, like light ADHD student, because they're modules, they're broken down, you work in teams, there's a lot of attention on very small groups. So I was able to thrive, really not knowing that. Why was I able to thrive, by the way? Because I broke my back. And because I broke my back, I was an average student then, and that's the hack of the ADHD. Teachers came home so that I didn't miss the year. And that one-to-one attention gave me an advantage that then I was easily able to bring along. And I didn't realize that. So there was no diagnosis. Plus, you're Italian, you must know that. Nobody says, oh my gosh, you must have ADHD, which is good in a way because there's no dramatization of what it is. And people don't put you on early drugs that are ineffective, because then in your life, once you know that you have it, there's nothing you can do except finding opportunities for you to just manage it the best way possible. And that means different things for different people. In my case, it was self-managed by chance because my parents had the right intuition. Who knows? The first part of my life. And then I found myself in this university. And for me, it was stressful because I didn't understand. So I was able to pass it, but I didn't particularly gain any personal value out of it. Classes were too big. It was all mnemonic learning. For me, that wasn't my way of digesting and growing. And so I found myself from like first in class to, above average in the mix, whatever. I didn't feel particularly motivated. So when I stopped, when I graduated from university, then I started working for Microsoft, and that was a beautiful adventure, but I wasn't happy. Like something inside me was missing, and I just did not know what it was. And the reality is that those years in Bocconi had kind of taken the wind out of my wings, I guess. Like it was really demotivating. And so I had to find my new norm. And so I decided to take a year, and now they would call it, I guess, FAFO year. And in that year, I decided to do something completely different. And I really badly wanted to do medicine, frankly, which I wanted to do all along, and I was convinced not to. And I felt how short-sighted of me. But that was 7 years. And so my FAFO year was like, what, all this or something else? And so I thought, why not drama? Turned out I had I had quite a good instinct about it. And so drama center was incredible, and it was a lot of fun, and it allowed me to explore other parts of my personality. And it was my part of the journey. I think I was somehow a little lost in that not being completely centered. I was able to add a few ingredients that actually I take along with me even today. So I'm very glad that I had the opportunity to add those ingredients to my toolkit.
Yeah, because I just thought it was so interesting, because there's two very opposing fields, but I suppose then tying back to early story would make sense. The medicine, the scientific approach, you wanted to do medicine even with the little perfume spray. And kind of touching on a point you made there about the US, you said if you'd gone to the US, it probably would have been, more suited for the US. How does that compare?
I think the method of learning. Yeah.
I mean, kind of on that topic of UK, US, Europe, US, I mean, or, Italy, US, I mean, what has your experience been being in the US, not just in education, but also kind of touching to, Dompé and the industry? I mean,
It's a loaded question, Emanuele. Well, let's sort it out. So under personal experience, I lived in UK, in US, and in Italy. In all three of these places, I must say there's something very European of all the places I've lived. Right now, less so because I'm living in California, but I'm living in the Bay Area. And somehow San Francisco feels, it still has that kind of vibe, although I live an hour from San Francisco near Palo Alto. And I'd say that those places are socially wildly different. The way you live is wildly different. The approach to living is incredibly different. And it's just a question of pace and structure. But it's also the question of possible or not possible. And here in the Bay Area, I feel there's just going to be more structure for people to tell you that you are going to make it versus you're not going to make it. And the idea, I'm just starting with a non-variable of having the same idea. Let's say Emanuele brings that idea to a board of peers in UK and takes the same specific idea to a board of peers here. And the access to capital is easier, but it has to do a lot with mentality. And I think here we're in the business of making dreams come true, and then they don't come true because we all believe in it, but still the idea was the same. So, tough luck. They don't all excel, but they try to feed it, and eventually they do land on something that actually happens. And in Europe, instead, access to capital is harder, and you have much different constraints, and those constraints make it harder. So it's a different setup. Effectively thinking about my business and what I know, pharma companies have changed and evolved over the last many, many decades. If you think about the history of medicine, we started off we brought that history a little bit with us, but we started off as a compound pharmacy. that was in Piazza della Scala. And so you would have the pharmacist put together those compounds for you, and you had solutions that were not necessarily scientifically proven, and some which had more base science leading on to them. Like, that was the idea. And then with time, you created regulatory agencies, there were methods, then those methods were enabled some sort of inefficiencies and ineffectivenesses, and they were flawed. And then suddenly they were able to course correct over the course of a year and evolve the way we do medicine, the way we perceive medicine. And the question is, where are we now on that timeline? And I think today we are in a very unique moment because of the enablers. If you look through the lens of AI, for example, how's that going to impact medicine? And I don't think it's going to happen overnight, and we've seen it. But for example, you've seen platforms like isomorphic potentially say, hey, we are redesigning the process of early discovery. What does that mean? That before pharma companies would spend 10, 20 years in a lab trying to put things together that could eventually be tested in an arena that had a specific target, and maybe that would be conductive to something that could advance or could not an area of a therapeutic area, right? Very complicated. Like, what were the chances? So what kind of databases did you need to have to just even get close to that idea? Now, you can do that in silico. You can have a computer run those tests, right? And kind of you can create a hypothesis, and that model can validate or not, or put all that knowledge together. And so suddenly it's not that company working on the compounds that it has in its warehouse, but it's about all the knowledge and all the literature that has ever been published. And you can see about, you can think about how things work. We call it mechanism of action. How does it work? And if it works for one thing, what could be something similar that works in the same direction? Or if I'm thinking about a different target or a different disease, what are potential paths that I know could be valuable? So it's not a perfect science. We are at the beginning of this new revolution, but there are platforms that today can hypothesize with you in minutes versus years. And so how long does it take to get to a molecule, to a preclinical idea that can be that has value? Today, maybe 3 to 6 months, something that just a couple of years ago would have taken decades. Now, it took a long time to get to a place where platforms could be able to perform this way. It took an awful lot of learning and literature to be factored in these platforms. But I think we are today in a situation where that is possible. And that is just the beginning. It's the tip of the iceberg. If you look at how the pharma sector can be revolution in the next decades to come, this is one little part called preclinical, right? Or drug discovery. It's even before. The preclinical is a little bit more extensive. But there's a lot more that can be done through the lens of technology, digitalization, artificial intelligence, all of it put together. So where would be the best place to attract that value? Where would be the best place to challenge the company? What does it mean to you, for you to have a 130-year-old company and thinking about the next 2 decades? Because you need to learn, and for me, that's going to be very, very important in the success of our company, to make sure I understand it correctly and I make the right decisions, because we will need to transform. It's not a question whether to, it's a question of when and how. And I feel that being here in Silicon Valley, in this part of our company's history, is absolutely imperative to make sure that I try my best to attempt giving the right sized answers.
There's a lot there. So obviously the history of Dompé and AI, but continue the idea of kind of geography and being there in Silicon Valley at this point in time in the company, that it's definitely seems like that's where the future. I mean, the AI innovation is taking place in the US, and it's beyond dispute. But is there a way that you mentioned mentality? Is there a way European mentality, not just Italian, kind of broadly speaking, can compete, can catch up in this sense, or do you think it's not as realistic?
Well, I don't know. The other part of the story is that things fail here too, right? So at the end of the day, I think that the European heritage is the most constructive basement to any kind of idea, because sometimes the European perspective is that of saying, well, just be prepared, right? Put the right valves in the right place, make sure that you are prepared and well taught around the basics, and you don't act superficially. Whereas superficiality is the key component, let's say, against this American way, where you're given the opportunities and you may thrive, but sometimes then there's little mistakes of superficiality here and there, and that could destroy you. So it's always somewhere in the middle. You always want to look at the upside of both worlds in a way that both can bring real value. And then access to capital is the key, right? Of course, there's brilliant people all over the world, really incredibly talented people. And people are the basic structure to unlock the value of tomorrow. It's always about people. People are the key enablers to everything. Somebody with a very smart idea, somebody brilliant, some with that resilience, like companies are made of people. People really make companies, not products. And, having a positive environment for them to thrive is important. What does that mean? So possibly there's culturally an idea of, I want you to do good, versus an idea of like, I don't want you to do good. And what is the framework of that look like? What does the framework of that look like? And how do you establish that culture? And I think there's hubs around the whole world that foster some of that by putting together elements of success. And success, I think, is very viral, and gives a little bit of that. Networks, being able to establish virtuous networks also works a lot. And despite all of this, of course, the lowest common denominator needs to be access to capital, or none of this can be unlocked.
So there's and it's you're more willing to take a risk. Investors in the US are just more willing to. There's more availability of the risk capital. I'd say that's kind of the crux of.
They give an opportunity, probably like a higher return if things go well, and there's more access just to like money. So there's more money, and that more money can reward good ideas in a more structured way, where you can take some negative turns before going out. And then it's the market, of course. Like if you have one product and all the efforts of research and production go to the Italian product, let's say, versus the American product, the American market is bigger, or the English language. If you have a podcast in English, let's say it's an easier podcast to have to spread around the world than it is in Italian, for example, or in languages that are less shared with the rest of the population. So there are parts of one world that are easier versus the other worlds, but at the end of the day, I think you just want to iterate, like, what do you want to do when you grow up, and where can you get the best ingredients? It's not about getting married to one philosophy or the other one. You have the opportunity to just look at it as a supermarket where you can get different brands of different things in every aisle you go. So it's a question of, what are you guys learning from Trinity College, for example, of virtuous methods to anything. And I guess it'll change depending on what you're exposed to. So there's good things to take from this and good things to take from that. And to have a summarized version of everything has to be very subjective, cannot be standardized.
I'd love to talk about Dompé, Nathalie. We're at this moment in the company where you're now in San Francisco. What are you most excited about over the next 5 years? You mentioned all these innovations in AI and what to look forward to, but I suppose for Dompé, what are you most...
The science. That's always the heart of our motivation and of our success is definitely science. And our pipeline, of course, is the thing that excites me the most. We've had a tremendous journey so far, a very personal journey for my father too. The success that we've had lately was based on was based on nerve growth factor, NGF, which is the reason why this Italian woman called Rita Levi-Montalcini was awarded
from Turin.
Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
Yes, from Turin, exactly. So you must know her. Very, very interesting woman. And the first thing that my dad did in his career was actually to open the manufacturing plant in L'Aquila. And at the opening, we had at the time, President Scalfaro and Rita Levi-Montalcini was there as well, by chance. And if you go back, how many manufacturing plant did Rita Levi-Montalcini inaugurate? Like maybe one in her life, and that was us. So the fact that 93, like 25 years later, exactly this company was the first one to be able to bring to the market a therapy based on NGF was, as an idea, incredibly romantic. And that was the beginning of this new chapter. And then with that, we tried to strengthen our capabilities of investing into research, governance, and doing all of that. And we are now in a moment where we're looking at back of the eye, front of the eye, CNS, and pain as our major platforms. And we're developing a pipeline that's what makes me want to wake up every morning, go to work, and gives me the drive to say, this is fantastic. I'm really excited.
And I recommend our listeners to go research Rita Levi-Montalcini. But I suppose, could we go deeper on, Dompé, and, you describe the culture almost startup-like, which, hearing now makes sense, being, in that proximity in Silicon Valley. What is the culture like at Dompé through your perspective, and what is the culture you want to create?
You nailed it in your question. Like it's a 130-year company. So calling it a startup is a little stretch, but it's not, because in fact, we've had this, the traditional part of our portfolio, the traditional part of our company has actually acted as an investor to the startup. That's how I see it, right? And through that, we were able in these last years to finance all of the efforts that then got us to where we are now. It wasn't an easy path, not at all, and probably would have gone bankrupt a few times had we not had this traditional business that supported us. And the traditional business is a beautiful part of our history. And if you're in Italy, it has a lot of like beloved brands that are well known and so on. So that is the translation. And it leads us to landing this new opportunity on the US market that was scientifically incredibly powerful, because it redefined the course of therapy for neurotrophic keratitis. It was a paradigm shift. It went from being a chronic disease to an acute disease. And so that was an incredible impact that set the tone. And so now, how can we chase that? How can we support that? How can we invest more on our scientific platform to enable that kind of success to be repeated? so that it's not a standalone, what kind of culture do you need? And so we started off, and I don't view the American part of our company as a standalone, but it does have the startup vibes, and we try to keep it as such because it has to have that dynamism, but somehow we integrated that with the rest of the business. And so it's one soul, one company, and it's resources that we have all over our world, from Italy, from US, but from the rest of the world too, where we have talent. And those are the people that are gonna help us structure the portfolio to make sure that there's a repetition and there's sustainability in the scientific choices that we make. So that level of culture, the Italian one on one side and the American had to contaminate each other. And hopefully this is what we're enabling.
Okay, so much there to unpack, but I suppose first question, what was it like? What is that integration like?
Well, you have going too fast on one side and risking the risk of being too slow on the other. That would be the simpler way to put it, in a way that most people would perceive it. It's not that easy. I think there's just a structure. If you have, like, on one side you have a startup, and on the other side you have corporate, what defines those two different sectors? And if you think about it, it's like, well, corporate structure, normally there's a lot of rules. You need to comply with very specific methodologies, and there's a time constraints. Like, it'll take time to get something approved, to get something going, to get that contract going, and et cetera, versus the startup dynamism and willingness to act quickly, flexibly, and get stuff done. And so I think that what we are called to answer is, how can we facilitate, like, these two souls to kind of blend, where we can be lean and give that flexibility, and to all the ideas, all the part of the platform that are the sons and daughters of these new efforts and of the scientific platform. And we can still be dynamic, and we can still be responsive, and we can still do all of that, but with a framework of a little structure that is not as imposing as a bigger company would be, et cetera, but some sort of, like, some way somehow leads the way to having a little bit of more structure, rules that also manage risk in a more appropriate way. Does that make sense? I'm explaining it well.
It makes sense, but still, what was that even like? I mean, taking a step back, what was it like taking on that role as CEO and kind of overseeing this and being in charge of this?
I think it was not as you would expect. In my case, at least, every succession story is different. But if you think about the comparison between me and my father has had 50 years of experience now guiding this group and guiding this company. And in his experiences, obviously collected many, many experiences, and negative and positive. But he is the sum of his negative exposures. That is effectively what defines his guts. So I'm assuming that by the number of experiences that one has, your gut becomes better and better and better. There's no way I can replace that now, today, unless I have the same exposure. Plus, the company, as I was explaining it to you, it has become a lot more complicated, a lot more sophisticated in scientific terms, in its ambitions to science, in the areas of expertise, and so on. So in our case, the succession plan, I had, I'm very, very lucky, because I was able to rely on a group of people that are the succession. They are with me, the succession. I am not replacing him. A team of people, a team of incredible people that I strongly rely on, who help me. And I say this in complete transparency. Like, the only thing that I think I would have never found in any other reality is a real team that has our best interests at heart, really at heart. And with passion and love helps me to manage this. And I view myself as somebody who helps them and enables them to do their work. So it's not exactly like replacing or getting into my dad's shoes, but it's more like, hey, to our CSO or to our CEO, what do you guys need to be successful? How can I enable that? And how can we do it together? So the perspective is a little different.
And would you say your father was one of the key mentors for that journey within Dompe?
My dad is my inspiration. He is the most incredible man that I've ever met. And of course, I'm a daddy's girl. I won't even try to hide that. But no, he's not exactly a mentor. He doesn't like teaching particularly, and he has zero patience, which doesn't make it easier. I was a little frustrated with the lack of mentorship in my life. And I didn't know how to do it. And I kind of felt like it was not helping me. Not to have any mentors was not conductive of anything positive until I owned that. And I said, okay, let me create the bucket of mentors that I think I need. And I realized that there was mentorship all around me if I had only looked broadly into their direction. And so I created my own mentor, my virtual mentor, made of little of areas of expertise. But I would say that the person that allowed me to unlock all of this was actually my husband. I work with him as well, and the experiences we went through together were definitely key into unlocking that level. And my husband was more of the California mentality. He was like, okay, you go along. And I'm like, I never did this before. And he's like, yeah, you'll do fine. And so you just start doing it out of need or out of, I don't know, the thought that somebody completely blindly believes in you, which is intoxicating and beautiful. And you start saying, well, hold on, maybe if he believes so much in me, maybe I can allow myself to believe a little bit in it too. And that was a unique experience that I think created enabled me to say, okay, take control of your life. And so whatever you need, just get it. And so I did.
It definitely seems as well. That's another thing I admire about America. The mentorship kind of philosophy in life and in a career and university. It seems a lot more common in America. Speaking to some friends over there.
Yeah. Again, I didn't have that technically. So I grabbed it and I did what I needed with it. But yes, I think here, if you have a proper corporate career, it is one of the opportunities that you're given right from the start. And I think that is incredibly helpful in modeling a way that unlocks opportunities to people and that give you a straight path. Like, it's not like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do, when, how, and is it even possible? It's like, it's right in front of you. Just need to reach out for it and it'll be given to you because you are shown the path. And the path is like, where are the keys? It's like, imagine going through a video game and knowing where the keys are with the super, the secrets that unlock the next level and so on. And it's I don't know why in Italy it's not particularly prevalent. I've never actually seen it. It's not the culture. And I do agree with you. It is incredibly important.
And you've clearly, kind of switching our focus, you've clearly built up a lot of resilience, not only throughout your life, but even, from those early days, with the accident. Obviously now there's all the success, the company's doing great. You're leading the 130-year history even further. But I'd love to kind of look at another moment when you're older, more recent, maybe perhaps. What's been the most difficult moment, the most challenging moment in your career professionally? And
there's always tough moments in every, like, life is made of ups and downs. And I don't view this as peak success at all. I think we have an incredible opportunity, but we need to nail it. And so I'm very focused on making sure that this is not a standalone success, but that we are exposed to the maximum possible opportunities, but we need to translate that value. And even if we do translate that value, as you and I were caressing before, we were caressing the idea that the whole pharma company traditional market will completely change in the next 1 or 2 decades. So this is not a one story. It's not a story of like, okay, we are arrived. We are part of a journey, and that journey is complicated and delicate. And there have been tough moments. There's always tough moments. I'm also, somebody that left everything she knew when she was 30. And so I wasn't exactly, when you're 20 and you move out, you bring along some sort of baggage. When you're 30 and you leave all of your family, of all of your friends, and you get into a new environment and you need to start again, it's definitely a different kind of challenge. And I have a beautiful family. We have 5 children at home, and that is definitely part of the challenge if you're a mom and you're trying to balance all of this, and then you have an incredibly talented husband. And so I don't want to give up. So I try to be a mom to my kids. I try to be a corporate housewife to my husband. And corporate housewife means that you manage everything at home. You manage all the doctors. You do everything that's necessary for the kids, for the logistics, the hires. I run the family office too, just because I just wanted to be part of that. And I'm also in support of his work. So we have meetings together, and we have all of that together. And at the same time, I'm running a company. My challenge was that I didn't want to give up to any of these things. And there were moments that nearly broke me. But somehow you fight through them. And somehow everything, I don't know. I'm still in that phase where it doesn't make sense, but you keep at it. And I trust infinitely that it'll make sense, and we'll get through it, because there's incredible women that have done it and have given all of it to managing and balancing these worlds. And I'm like, well, why not? We live in an era where there's incredible entrepreneurs that are able to hustle like 3-4 companies at a time. How's that different?
So on that, would you say, and this is something you've spoken about as well, not fearing mistakes. You're managing all these different endeavors, but you're not fearing so much about a mistake if it's made.
Well, there's days where I fail in all of these fields, like literally. There's days where my kids are unhappy with me. There's days where I fight with my husband. There's days where something goes wrong and, I fail at something at work. And there's days where all these worlds decide that you're failing in the same moment at all of these things at the same time. And it sucks. And those days are not good days, but
how are you getting through them?
I don't know.
Double click on this.
Yeah. This is the thing. The rhythm is so fast that it's like taking a big breath and not breathing, and as long as you can survive not breathing for a whole minute, you'll be fine, because then it's past that. And then somehow things carry on. And then you don't desensitize, but you realize it's not the end of the world, right? You realize like, oh gosh, I made that mistake. It felt like the end of the world, but today we're still standing and we'll make other mistakes. And okay, so maybe it was worth trying. And then you learn that sometimes you just need to swallow your pride and just manage it. And kids are hugely humbling in this equation. Like, they can tell you just how limited you are, and you need to go beyond your limits, because you will lose it. You will lose your cool. And what are you going to do about it? And I've learned how to say sorry to them as well. And sometimes I lose my patience, because I tell them 9 times one thing and they'll do it again the 10th time. And I lose my cool. I become a disgusting person. I look at myself in the mirror. I'm like, I don't like that person. But what am I supposed to do? Right? Like, I'll do it. And then I go shyly to them and I'm like, look, I'm really sorry mommy lost her patience, but you need to start listening. I beg you, listen. It's a fun experience. You just like, and the variety of our children, like our oldest one, and my husband had 3 kids with his previous wife, and we were all a blended family all together, and so it's a fun ride. But our oldest is turning 16, and he's a man. Like he's like, I can't, like he's becoming a man. And the youngest one is 3-year-old, and the youngest one manages to basically take advantage of all the other components of the family, as if she was running the company at home. And she threatens everybody because her tantrums can be so much bigger than everybody else's, that do you really want to make her mad? Because if you don't, you're going to do as she says. And so this is the challenge, like when you come home and you're so tired, but you know you cannot give in, because that will set a terrible example to her. Or even that aspect of the family, it's actually endearing at the end on good days. But then sometimes it's just a bunch of like, oh, the baby is sick, she keeps you up all night. And then the following morning you get to the office and you're short-tempered and there's problems coming out from the woodworks. And then you arrive home and you have all the other pending issues on the family office side or whatever it is. So trust me, there are negative days, there are negative experiences, and there's big mistakes that you make every day. Some of which are truly big. And the best lesson learned, I think, since I've been here, is that the cost of making a mistake is less high than you think.
So it's okay to make mistakes. That's not what they teach. It's not what they teach.
Absolutely okay. I know it's not what they teach you, and I come from the extreme version of what they teach you. I'm Italian. I'm a female. I'm relatively young still, even if you might not think that. Don't tell me. I don't want to know. But I'm taught to stay quiet and only speak when I'm asked to speak, and always only be right. So I know that's not what you guys are being taught, but it's not true.
What would you, I suppose, wrapping up, just looking at the time, but what would you tell, I know it's, what would you tell a university student now? Especially, our female listeners, half the people in society are women, and, we've got a lot of ambition. My 3 sisters are also, they're very ambitious. The dinner table, they say, Emanuela, you're going to be working for me one day. So, what would your advice be?
To never stop believing and knowing that this is still a man's world, pretty much. And so it's the path towards being integrated in society is still a little challenging and longer than one would assume, but that everything is possible. And then the more we work together, the more we can unlock that value in one way. But I think at the end of the day, what we find is a game. And that if you always continue to think that this life is your opportunity running your game, you need to have fun with it. You need to have fun with it. You need to take things seriously, but not too much. And you need to start making mistakes, because mistakes are exactly the ingredients that we need. And we need to be comfortable with it. And so at the end of the day, I think the most valuable story is just be out there and make mistakes. It's going to be fine, especially when you're 20 years old and you have nothing to lose. That's the reality. You think you have something to lose. You don't. You really don't. You have nothing to lose. And in fact, losing even those little things that you think you have is beneficial, and will get you into the right mindset of pursuing anything that you want and going for it. But having fun with it and perceiving it's more like a game than, more than the end game, I think is useful.
And could I ask just one more follow-up? What is your advice for leadership? As a leader, what's one lesson you would give to students on this as well?
Yeah. Honestly, to think less about leading and think more about listening.
Okay. Active listening. Okay.
active listening. Sometimes it's like that's what a leader has to do. A leader doesn't have to be an expert in every single field. It would be impossible. So I do think that the biggest weapon that you have is listening. And if you can listen well, and if you can go below the surface and you can dig deeper, then it's going to be easier to act upon do the right things and act upon them.
Nathalie, thank you so much. We could have continued for a lot longer. There's so many other things I've got here to dig deeper on even as well, but this has been really, really interesting. So really thank you for the time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Emanuele.
You have been listening to the Trinity SMF podcast. You can find more of this podcast on our website, www.trinitysmf.com, and follow us on our social media to find out more about the podcast releases, upcoming events, and much more. Thank you again for listening, and stay tuned.